I found the flash drive by accident. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was tidying up the apartment while my wife, Lauren, was out grocery shopping. Her coat was draped over the back of a chair, and when I picked it up to hang it in the closet, something heavy shifted in the pocket. At first, I thought it was her keys, but when I reached in, my fingers closed around something cold and plastic. A flash drive. It was small, black, and completely unremarkable. Something you might pick up at a gas station or find at the bottom of a drawer. For a moment, I considered just putting it back where I'd found it. After all, it wasn't unusual for Lauren to carry random things in her pockets. She was a designer, always storing USB drives for projects she worked on. But something about this flash drive felt off. It wasn't labeled, and when I glanced at her work laptop on the kitchen counter, I noticed it already had another drive plugged into it. Curiosity got the better of me. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that I was just checking to make sure it wasn't something important she'd forgotten about. So I grabbed my own laptop, plugged it in, and waited for the drive to load. It only took a few seconds, but those seconds felt like an eternity. When the folder popped up, my heart sank. The flash drive wasn't filled with design files or project notes. It contained videos, dozens of them. Each one was labeled with a date and time, spanning the last 6 months. The first video was dated 2 days ago. I clicked on it, and my screen filled with the view of a small, dimly lit bedroom. The camera was positioned high in the corner of the room, looking down at a bed with wrinkled sheets and a worn-out headboard. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The room was empty, and the only sound was the faint hum of a ceiling fan. Then the door opened and a man walked in. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a black hoodie. He wasn't alone. A woman followed him into the room. She was laughing, her voice muffled by the poor audio quality. But I recognized her immediately. It was Lauren. My chest tightened as I watched the video play out. The two of them sat on the bed, talking quietly. Their body language was intimate, too intimate. The man leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair behind Lauren's ear, and she smiled. I couldn't watch anymore. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands trembling. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the closed laptop as my mind raced. What the hell was this? Who was that man? And why was Lauren keeping videos of them on a hidden flash drive? I tried to rationalize it, to come up with some innocent explanation, but the more I thought about it, the worse it got. This wasn't just some old memory or forgotten file. The video was recent, only 2 days old. I opened the laptop again, my curiosity now fueled by a sick sense of dread. The next video was from last week. It showed the same room, the same setup, but this time Lauren and the man were already lying on the bed when the recording started. They weren't just talking anymore. My stomach churned as I paused the video. I couldn't bring myself to watch the rest, but I couldn't stop looking either. I scrolled through the files, my eyes scanning the dates and times. There were over 50 videos, all spaced out over the past several months. Some were only a few minutes long, others were nearly an hour. I clicked on one from last month. This time, the camera showed Lauren standing by the window, her back to the lens. The man walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned into him, her face glowing with a kind of happiness I hadn't seen in years. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just an affair. Lauren wasn't sneaking around in secret, trying to hide something from me. She was recording it, saving it. Why? I spent the next hour watching video after video, each one worse than the last. They weren't all filmed in the same room. Some were in hotel rooms, others in cars or parks, but the one constant was Lauren and the man. I tried to focus on his face, hoping to recognize him, but he was careful. In most of the videos, he kept his hoodie up, his face turned away from the camera. The only thing I knew for sure was that Lauren had been meeting him for months. By the time she came home, I was sitting on the couch, the flash drive clutched tightly in my hand. "Hey," she said, walking into the apartment with a bag of groceries. "What's up? You look pale." I didn't respond. Instead, I held up the flash drive. Her smile faltered. "What's that?" she asked, her voice cautious. "You tell me," I said, my voice low. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might try to deny it. But then she sighed, setting the groceries on the counter. "Where did you find that?" she asked. "In your coat pocket," I said. "Now tell me what the hell is on it." She hesitated, her hand resting on the edge of the counter. "It's not what you think," she said finally. I laughed bitterly. "It's not what I think? Lauren, I've seen the videos." Her face paled, and she sank into the chair across from me. "Please," she said, her voice shaking. "Let me explain." Lauren stared at me from across the room, her face pale and her hands gripping the edge of the table. For a moment, she didn't speak, her lips parting and closing as if she was struggling to find the right words. "I can explain," she said finally, her voice trembling. "Then explain," I said, holding up the flash drive. "Explain why this was in your coat pocket. Explain why there are videos of you with another man. Explain why it looks like you've been sneaking around behind my back for months." She flinched at my tone, but didn't look away. "It's not an affair," she said. I almost laughed at how ridiculous that sounded. "Not an affair. Lauren, I watched the videos. I saw you with him. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending it's something else." She shook her head quickly. "It's not what you think," she said again. "Just let me talk, please." I folded my arms, leaning back against the couch. "Go ahead," I said. "Talk." She took a deep breath, her fingers tapping nervously against the table. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she said. "But the truth is, I've been working on something dangerous." I narrowed my eyes, confused. "Dangerous? What the hell are you talking about?" Lauren hesitated, then lowered her voice as if someone might overhear. "The man in the videos, he's not who you think he is. His name is James, and he's an informant. I've been helping him gather evidence." I stared at her, completely thrown. "An informant? Lauren, that doesn't make any sense. What kind of evidence? And why would you be involved?" She hesitated again, glancing toward the door as though someone might barge in at any moment. "It's complicated," she said. "James used to work for a dangerous group, people involved in things you can't imagine. Trafficking, smuggling, laundering money. He came to me because he needed help exposing them." I blinked, my anger briefly replaced by confusion. "Why would he come to you?" She met my eyes, her voice quiet. "Because I'm not just a designer, Evan. I work for an organization that helps take people like him down. It's off the books. That's why I couldn't tell you." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe her, but the other part of me was screaming that this couldn't be true. Lauren had never mentioned anything like this before. She was supposed to be a graphic designer, someone who spent her days creating marketing campaigns and logos, not running covert operations with informants. "This is insane," I said finally. "Do you really expect me to believe this? That you're some kind of undercover agent?" "I'm not an agent," she said quickly. "It's not like that. I'm part of a team that works behind the scenes. We connect people like James to law enforcement, help them gather evidence, and protect them when things go wrong." I shook my head, still struggling to process her explanation. "And the videos?" I asked. "Why would you record all of this? Why keep it on a flash drive hidden in your pocket?" She hesitated, her face tightening. "The videos are proof," she said. "James insisted on it. He wanted everything documented in case something happened to him. And the way you two are acting in those videos." I pressed. "The way he touches you, the way you look at him. What's that supposed to be? Part of the job?" Lauren's expression hardened. "It's not like that," she said. "James trusts me. He needed to believe I was on his side completely, or he wouldn't have gone through with it. That's all it was, building trust." I stood up, pacing the room as my mind raced. Her explanation was elaborate, but was it the truth? Or was this just an elaborate story to cover her tracks? "Why didn't you tell me any of this sooner?" I demanded. "If you're really doing something this dangerous, don't you think I have the right to know?" "I wanted to tell you," she said, her voice breaking. "But I couldn't risk it. The people James is involved with, they're dangerous, Evan. If they found out about you, about us, they wouldn't hesitate to use you against me." My blood ran cold at her words. As much as I wanted to stay angry, there was a flicker of fear creeping in. If what she was saying was true, then this wasn't just about our marriage. It was about survival. I sat back down, rubbing my temples. So what happens now? I asked. Lauren hesitated. James disappeared 2 days ago, she said quietly. He didn't show up to our last meeting, and I haven't been able to reach him since. I'm afraid something's happened to him. And you think the people he was working against are involved? I asked. She nodded. It's possible. That's why I've been holding onto the videos. They're the only leverage we have. Leverage, I repeated, my voice rising. Lauren, do you even hear yourself? You're not a spy. You're not trained for this. You're going to get yourself killed. She didn't respond, but the look in her eyes told me she knew I was right. The conversation ended there. I didn't know what else to say, and Lauren seemed exhausted, retreating to the bedroom with the flash drive in hand. I stayed in the living room, staring at the wall and trying to make sense of everything. Was she telling the truth? Or was this just an elaborate lie to cover up an affair? Either way, one thing was clear. My wife was hiding a side of herself I'd never seen before, and whether I wanted to or not, I was now part of it. I barely slept that night. Lauren stayed locked in the bedroom, the flash drive presumably with her, while I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling and replaying our conversation over and over in my head. Everything she had said felt so far-fetched, so outside the realm of what I thought I knew about her. Lauren, the woman I had been married to for 5 years, was meticulous about meal prepping, spent her evenings binge-watching TV dramas, and complained when the internet slowed down. She wasn't the type of person who ran covert operations with informants. And yet, when I'd looked into her eyes as she explained herself, there had been no hesitation, no sign of a lie. Either she was the best liar I'd ever met, or she was telling the truth. The next morning, Lauren emerged from the bedroom looking pale but resolute. She barely spoke to me as she poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table. "Are you still mad at me?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. I didn't answer right away. Was I mad? Of course. But more than that, I was confused and scared. If her story was true, then we were in the middle of something far bigger than a marital spat. "I don't know what I am," I said finally. "This doesn't feel real, Lauren." She nodded, staring into her coffee. "I get it," she said. "I wouldn't believe it either if I were in your shoes." "Then help me believe it," I said. "Prove to me that you're telling the truth." Lauren hesitated, then stood up and disappeared into the bedroom. When she returned, she was holding her laptop and the flash drive. Over the next hour, Lauren showed me everything: emails, encrypted messages, and files that James had given her. She walked me through her side of the story, explaining how James had approached her nearly a year ago, claiming to have dirt on a trafficking ring run by powerful people. He'd wanted help documenting everything and connecting with law enforcement without putting himself at risk. "I have a background in digital security," she explained. "That's how I got involved. I was supposed to help him compile evidence and stay off their radar." "And the videos?" I asked. "James wanted everything documented," she said. "He thought it would be harder for them to discredit him if we had recordings." As she spoke, she pulled up one of the files on her laptop. This one wasn't like the others I'd seen. It wasn't intimate or personal. It was footage of a transaction. The same man from the other videos was handing an envelope to someone else, and in the background, I could see a shipping container with its doors slightly ajar. Lauren paused the video, zooming in on the container. Inside, I could make out the faint outline of people, dozens of them. My stomach turned. "Is that?" She nodded grimly. "Trafficking victims. Women, children, anyone they can exploit. James said this group has been operating for years, smuggling people across state lines and even internationally. He was part of it for a while, but he wanted out. That's why he came to me." The more Lauren explained, the clearer it became that she hadn't been lying. The evidence was overwhelming, and the story she told fit the pieces I'd seen on the flash drive. But it also left me with a sinking feeling in my gut. "What happened to James?" I asked. "Why hasn't he reached out?" "I don't know," she admitted. "He missed our last meeting, and his phone is disconnected. I've been trying to contact him through his encrypted email, but he hasn't responded." "Do you think they found him?" She didn't answer, but the look on her face said enough. As the day went on, I started to notice things I hadn't before. Little details that suddenly felt significant. The way Lauren kept glancing at her phone, as if waiting for a call. The way she jumped every time there was a knock at the door. The way she double-checked the locks before bed. She was scared, and if what she was saying was true, she had every reason to be. That night, Lauren received an email. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her laptop, when she suddenly froze. "Evan," she said, her voice trembling. "Come here." I walked over and looked at the screen. The email was from an anonymous sender, and the subject line read, "We know what you've been doing." The message was short but chilling. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." Attached to the email was a single image, a photo of our apartment building, taken from across the street. My blood ran cold. "Is this from them?" I asked. Lauren nodded, her hand shaking as she closed the laptop. "They found us." "Okay," I said, trying to stay calm. "What do we do now? Do we go to the police?" "We can't," she said quickly. "Not yet. If they've compromised James, there's a chance they've already infiltrated local law enforcement. We don't know who we can trust." "Then what?" I asked, panic creeping into my voice. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to come after us." Lauren took a deep breath, her mind clearly racing. "We need to get out of here," she said finally. "Pack a bag, grab the essentials. We're leaving tonight." The next few hours were a blur. I threw clothes into a suitcase, while Lauren gathered the flash drive and other evidence. We locked the apartment behind us and drove to a motel on the edge of town, paying in cash and using fake names. I barely slept that night, my mind replaying the events of the past few days like a broken record. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the email, the photo, the shadowy figure from the videos. By morning, I knew one thing for sure. Our lives would never be the same. The motel was small and nondescript, the kind of place people stayed when they didn't want to be noticed. The curtains smelled faintly of mildew, and the flickering light above the bathroom sink buzzed faintly, adding to the atmosphere of unease. Lauren sat at the small table in the corner of the room, her laptop open in front of her, and the flash drive plugged in. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone as if I could will it to give us answers. "What now?" I asked, breaking the silence. Lauren didn't look up. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, her face tense with concentration. "I need to know if James left anything for me," she said. "Sometimes he would store backups in cloud drives or encrypted folders, just in case something happened. Do you really think he had time to do that?" I asked. "I don't know," she admitted, "but it's all we've got right now." Over the next few hours, Lauren combed through the files on the flash drive and scoured her email for anything she might have missed. Meanwhile, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every time I peeked through the motel curtains, I half expected to see someone sitting in a car outside, watching our room. Lauren finally sighed and leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. "Nothing," she said. "If James left anything, I can't find it." "What about the police?" I asked. "There has to be someone we can trust, someone who can help us." "I told you, we can't risk it," she said. "If they've infiltrated local law enforcement, going to the police could make things worse." "So what's the plan?" I asked, frustration creeping into my voice. "We can't just keep running forever, Lauren." She was quiet for a moment, her eyes fixed on the laptop screen. "There's one person who might be able to help," she said finally. "Who?" "His name is Daniel. He's sort of my handler. He oversees cases like this, but he's not officially connected to any agency. That's why he's safe." I blinked. "You have a handler? Since when?" Lauren gave me a weary look. "Ev, there's a lot you don't know about what I do. Can we save the questions until we're not in immediate danger?" She pulled out her phone and dialed a number, putting it on speaker. It rang twice before a man's voice answered. "Lauren," he said, his tone sharp. "What's going on?" "They found us," she said. "James is missing, and now they're coming after me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Where are you?" "A motel," she said. "Outskirts of the city." I'm with Evan. You need to get out of there, Daniel said immediately. If they've already made contact, they'll track you down. Do you have the evidence? Yes, she said. But I don't know how much longer we'll be safe. I need backup, Daniel. I can't do this alone. Another pause. All right, he said. There's a safe house about an hour outside the city. I'll text you the address. Go there, and I'll meet you as soon as I can. The drive to the safe house was tense. Lauren kept glancing at the rearview mirror, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching the flash drive like it was a lifeline. Do you trust this Daniel guy? I asked. I wouldn't have called him if I didn't, she said. He's the only one who knows the full scope of what we're dealing with. The safe house turned out to be a small cabin hidden deep in the woods, miles away from the nearest town. It was modest but secure, with reinforced doors and a generator humming softly in the background. We settled in as best as we could, though the anxiety of the situation made it hard to relax. Every sound outside, the rustling of leaves, the distant howl of a coyote, made me jump. Daniel arrived the next morning, a tall, wiry man with a weathered face and sharp eyes. He wasted no time getting down to business, spreading a map of the city across the table and pointing out key locations connected to the trafficking ring. James was working on infiltrating their distribution network, Daniel explained. He managed to get close enough to gather evidence. But if they've figured out who he is, he's either on the run or worse. Lauren nodded, her face grim. And now they think I have what he knows. Which means you're a target, Daniel said. But if we play this right, we can turn the tables on them. I watched their conversation, feeling like an outsider in my own life. The way they talked, quick, precise, and full of coded references, made it clear this wasn't their first time dealing with something like this. What do you need from me? I asked finally. Daniel glanced at me, his expression unreadable. Just stay out of the way, he said. Over the next 2 days, Daniel and Lauren worked tirelessly to piece together the evidence on the flash drive. They cross-referenced it with other intel Daniel had gathered, building a case that would hold up in court if they could get it into the right hands. But the more they uncovered, the clearer it became that the people they were up against wouldn't go down without a fight. They've got connections everywhere, Daniel said, showing us a list of names. Politicians, law enforcement, even corporate executives. This isn't just a trafficking ring. It's an empire. And we're the ones trying to bring it down, Lauren said quietly. On the third night at the safe house, the silence was broken by the sound of tires crunching on gravel. I looked out the window and saw 2 black SUVs pulling up to the cabin. They found us, I said, my voice shaking. Daniel grabbed his gun and motioned for us to stay low. Get to the basement, he said. Now. Lauren and I scrambled down the narrow staircase, my heart pounding in my chest. The basement was small and dark, with only a single bulb casting a dim glow over the concrete walls. Stay quiet, Lauren whispered, pulling me into the shadows. Upstairs, I could hear the muffled sound of voices and the heavy thud of footsteps. Daniel's voice cut through the noise, calm but firm. You're trespassing, he said. Leave now, or there will be consequences. The reply was too quiet for me to hear. But moments later, there was a loud crash, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. My breath caught in my throat as Lauren gripped my arm tightly. The minutes stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, the gunfire stopped, and the house fell silent. When we emerged from the basement, the scene upstairs was chaos. Furniture was overturned, glass was shattered, and the air was thick with the smell of gunpowder. Daniel was standing by the front door, his gun still in hand, his face grim. They're gone, he said. For now. Lauren looked at him, her expression a mix of relief and fear. What do we do now? We finish what we started, Daniel said. We take them down before they come back. The attack on the safe house left no illusions about how dangerous this situation had become. These people weren't just trying to intimidate us. They were trying to eliminate us. Daniel was right. If we didn't strike first, they'd come back, and next time, they wouldn't leave any room for escape. That night, Daniel made a decision. We have enough evidence. he said, spreading out the flash drive files and notes on the table. It's time to move. We're going to expose them. Lauren nodded, her determination evident. Who do we trust? I have a contact, Daniel said. Someone high up in federal law enforcement. He's clean, and he's been waiting for something like this to take these guys down. But we'll have to meet him in person. Where? I asked. Downtown, Daniel said. It's risky, but if we stay here, they'll find us again. This is our only chance. The next morning, we left the safe house just before dawn. Daniel drove. Lauren sat in the passenger seat clutching the flash drive, and I was in the back, trying to stay calm. The roads were quiet, but every passing car made my heart race. By the time we reached the rendezvous point, a parking garage in the heart of the city, it was mid-morning. Daniel's contact was already there, a tall man in a suit leaning against a black sedan. He looked up as we pulled in, his expression guarded. This is Agent Morris, Daniel said as we got out of the car. He's with the FBI. Agent Morris wasted no time. Do you have it? He asked. Lauren handed him the flash drive, her hands trembling slightly. Everything you need is on there, she said. Videos, transactions, names, dates. It's enough to bring them down. Morris plugged the drive into a laptop and scanned the files, his face unreadable. After a few minutes, he nodded. This is solid, he said. We'll need to move quickly, but this could blow the whole operation wide open. Just as relief began to wash over me, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A black SUV pulling into the garage. Then another. They're here, I said, my voice tight. Morris looked up sharply. Get down, he barked. The next few moments were chaos. Men in dark clothes poured out of the SUVs, guns drawn. Daniel shoved Lauren and me behind a concrete pillar, pulling out his own weapon as Agent Morris returned fire. The air filled with the sound of gunfire and shouts. I crouched low, my heart pounding, as Lauren clung to my arm. We can't stay here, she whispered. Daniel nodded, motioning toward a side exit. Go. We'll cover you. Lauren and I ran, the sound of bullets echoing behind us. The stairwell was narrow and dark, but we didn't stop until we reached the street. A car screeched to a halt in front of us, and I froze, thinking it was another attacker. But it wasn't. Agent Morris was behind the wheel. Get in, he yelled. We didn't hesitate. As soon as we were in the car, Morris sped off, weaving through traffic as Lauren clutched the seat, her face pale. What about Daniel? I asked, my voice shaking. He'll be fine, Morris said. He knows how to handle himself. Right now, our priority is getting you two to safety. Over the next 24 hours, everything changed. Morris and his team used the evidence from the flash drive to execute a series of raids, targeting the trafficking ring's operations across the state. News broke almost immediately, with headlines exposing a network of corruption that stretched from local businesses to high-ranking officials. Lauren and I were placed in protective custody while the arrests unfolded. It was surreal watching the news, seeing the faces of people who had once seemed untouchable being led away in handcuffs. By the end of the week, the operation was over. The trafficking ring had been dismantled, and dozens of victims were rescued. In the aftermath, Lauren and I tried to pick up the pieces of our lives. We moved to a new city under new identities, cutting ties with anyone who might connect us to the case. It wasn't easy, but for the first time in weeks, we felt safe. One evening, as we sat on the porch of our small house, Lauren turned to me. I'm sorry, she said, for everything, for dragging you into this. I shook my head. You didn't drag me into anything, I said. You did what you had to do, and you saved lives. She smiled faintly, but there was a sadness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The events of the past few weeks had changed us both, and I knew we'd never truly be the same. But we were alive, and for now, that was enough.